Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, Spencer Stewart, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member, along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources and the co-founder and editor-at-large of Corporate Board Member magazine. We're here at the Corporate Board Members Annual Boardroom Summit, a collection of board members and CEOs that come together to talk about governance and other boardroom issues. And it's a pleasure to be here because we have access to some great guests. And today is no exception to that. Today we're going to be talking about tips for establishing a good CEO board relationship. And joining me is Cindy Baier, who's the president and CEO of Brookdale Senior Living. Welcome, Cindy.
Hi, TK. It's good to be here.
You sort of know why you're here because I'm impressed at how you have handled your assignment and this issue of board and CEO relations. But it's interesting because I don't know what happened in your interview process, but certainly when I had mine in a similar situation or others I've talked to, the committee doesn't spend a lot of time talking about your philosophy on board CEO relationships. Yet you and I both know that it really is a large part of the job, you know, when you take it. So I guess my first question to you is, were you asked about any of that? And if you weren't asked, did you think about it a lot in the concept of who you were interviewing and how that would be, how you would handle those relationships?
I actually was asked, so I was happy that I was asked. But in our interview process, in addition to completing a strategy, I talked a lot about the culture and about the relationship that I wanted with the board. So for me, the board is a lot of fabulous resources that has a unique perspective about the business that we're in. And so I wanted to pull the board close and to get them to help with key aspects of the turnaround strategy where they had unique expertise. And the good news is, because I was an internal candidate and I had come from the CFO position, I had a good working relationship with the board before taking the CEO seat.
So can you give some examples of what you've done to sort of establish that relationship? And obviously a lot of it's on the foundation of communication, but share, if you will, with our audience some of the things that you've sort of put into place.
Sure. One of the things that I really like is every Friday or Saturday I sit down and write just a few paragraphs to the board telling them what I've been focused on for the week and what's on my mind. Sometimes it's a story about a resident, sometimes it's what's happening in the industry, sometimes it's just community visits that I've been in. But that, I find, sort of keeps them involved with the business on a weekly basis without getting involved in the details. Also, before each of the board meetings, I set time aside and I call each of the board members to understand what's on their mind. I usually try to time it after the board materials have been delivered, but before we get into the boardroom, so I know if they have any questions or concerns. And then in addition, we leverage different board members directly and differently. So we have a board member who's a former CFO. He helps us with our earnings materials, including the scripts. He often has a nice third-party review of how it might be received. We have another board member who comes from a sales and marketing background, and so we test ideas with her about some of the promotions that we're talking about or what we might want to do. We have a COO of a hospital, and so she helps us with some of the things they do around quality and how we might improve the culture as it relates to rounding with our associates. So we try to leverage the experience, but what we try to do is keep our board close while keeping them strategic enough that they can help us make really good decisions.
What's interesting is you, before you took the CEO spot, you were serving on a board.
I was.
Bonton, I think, was the board, so you obviously went on that board as what I would call a next gen or a younger director. So in that experience, how did that help shape sort of when your philosophy, so you knew when you get the job, here's the things that I want to do from that experience you had sitting on the other side of the table?
So at Bonton, it was a great experience for me to learn a lot about governance and how boards should work. And I valued the opportunity to sort of work with the management team, but not to surprise them. And so learning that relationship of making sure that you're doing governance without sort of getting involved in the detailed operations was something that was very good learning for me. I also learned that if you don't connect with the board more frequently than the board meetings, it's very hard to stay current and to sort of be fully connected with what's happening in the company. And so that's why I started the weekly board update that I did, because it was just a good way to stay connected and to make sure that our directors were always focused on Brookdale.
Yeah. So I assume in all of this that you would be very invested in what skill sets those next directors have coming in. I mean, you're a perfect example of somebody that understands the value that a board brings in the check and balance that they can be to strategy and all the things that you do. So not only does the board think about who can take critical chair seats, but I think from your perspective, you're making sure that everybody understands that skill sets are important to you having resources in the board.
Absolutely, and Brookdale went through sort of a pretty big shift, right? So our board was historically very heavy in terms of real estate expertise and financial expertise and sort of M&A, right? Because we were a deal company and we did a lot of deals. But the reality is that we are an operator of healthcare, right? And so as we looked at the skills that were on our board, we recognized that we had a gap in terms of some of the healthcare experience. So we wanted 2 healthcare executives. And then if you think about the massive shift that's happening with how healthcare will be funded, we thought that we needed to have sort of a payer, someone who understood how the insurance companies affected healthcare, even though we're a primarily private pay business. That will change how seniors get healthcare. That will change what the expectations are. So we went out very consciously looking for 2 candidates that had healthcare expertise, one that could chair the audit committee, so we looked for somebody who had a sitting CFO background, and the other who could really help us on sales and marketing, as well as envisioning the future as to what the healthcare changes would mean for Brookdale. And it was really very good. Now for us, we were able to get diverse candidates at the same time. So we found 2 women to join our board, one of which was African American. And so we got not only diversity of experience, but also ethnic and cultural diversity.
Yeah. Before we close, I want to give Brookdale and your management team an unsolicited positive comment, because I had a mother in the Brookdale Senior Living Network, and it worked out very well. So I guess you would call me a good customer, you know, from that perspective. But I wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us, and I'm sure your comments will be very helpful for those that are trying to make sure that their board and CEO relationship works.
Thanks, and I'm so happy that your mom's experience was a positive one. It was great talking with you today.
Yep, thank you, Cindy. And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms, brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, Spencer Stewart, the Conference Board, and corporate board member, along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.